So the San Marcos River, as you know, and the Comal rivers, they are fed by the Edwards Aquifer. Those are both spring-fed rivers, and so they have very unique chemical and physical characteristics, and they support plants and animals that most streams in this area do not support. And so we also have endangered species because we have species that are found only in the San Marcos River or the Comal River.
So we have our San Marcos salamander, our Texas wild rice, and both of these are, only found in this area or in San Marcos. You can see just how thick the wild rice has grown in, a lot more than what it's been in summers past. And I mean, a lot of people look at it and are just kind of like, oh, all that vegetation, and they kind of relate it somewhat to seaweed. And I'm like, even though we're in a freshwater body, but yeah, definitely that has grown so much. And then our fountain darter, we have our Comal Springs dry pod beetle, our Texas blind salamander, and then we have our Comal Springs riffle beetle, our San Marcos gambusia, and then our Peck's Cave amphipod.
We went out in early March, and then April and May we weren't allowed to. We weren't permitted to go out for, of course, obvious reasons. And as far as the Texas Stream Team, our citizen scientists were also, quarantined. And so I think there were some missed opportunities there to go out and monitor. I was able to look at 2 sites. One is at Sewell Park. And so, that was closed down for any kind of access, whether it be students or general, public. And so at Sewell Park, one of the things I noticed just from data from February and March, we don't have any April data for Sewell Park. But just in that short span, there are some differences in the results that are coming in from the citizen scientists. I wouldn't say it's real significant at this point. It's 2 data points, it's not like 10 or 20. and it's 1 site. So things like total dissolved solids, which is a derivative of specific conductance. We did see slightly lower values in March than we did in February. And that could be a result of the suspended sediments and things that get stirred up, when people are accessing those sites. The City Park Bridge right there in the middle of town, that's one that we did have data for May. So it went from March to May. And again, the specific conductance, the total dissolved solids also saw a decrease.
Without species like Texas wild rice and our fountain darter, we wouldn't have a river, because the only reason that San Antonio is capping their flows and the only reason we're trying to enhance the habitat is because we have endangered species. Without them, San Antonio would be full out pumping the Edwards Aquifer until the San Marcos and Comal rivers would be dry.
Litter is such a huge problem in any water body. There is just so much litter all of the time, every day. And so I know that significantly was reduced with not being, nobody being able to get on the river, being able to dump anything into the river directly. People don't think about it, but a lot of those pollutants that they're just, dumping or they leave behind, they don't pick up, last in the water, and it goes downstream and it hits our ocean, and it takes a very long time to degrade if it does at all. Styrofoam, it's the easiest one to just break down and crumple into a whole bunch of little pieces, and then that's just like free floating, and fish can't decipher what that is, so that definitely is a problem. It does get consumed, unfortunately.
If you think about the water column, generally, you go to the river and it looks pretty clear. You can see, which means, when it's clear, the light can penetrate. And so when sunlight can penetrate the water column, plants need sunlight to photosynthesize, produce oxygen as a byproduct. When things are stirred up, there's less light penetration, less plant productivity, less dissolved oxygen being produced. So your DO levels decrease as well.
It's cool to see the impacts of, what the river, kind of how it bounces back, or how it would look if we didn't have as much recreation.
However, we all know that that is not a situation that can continue. It's not realistic. But my hope is that we have seen maybe the benefits, and maybe we can implement some kind of compromise between just massive amounts of people and a more controlled amount of people.
The vegetation on the riverbank is very important to the sediment quality in the river as well. It affects the water quality directly. If you don't have any vegetation on the riverbank, if the sediment is exposed when it rains, you have runoff. And with runoff, when the rainfall runs off the surface of the ground, and there's no sediment there's no vegetation to maintain that sediment in place, you have erosion occurring. And again, that's another source of suspended materials in the water column. So if you have, less people accessing the river via the riverbank, then you likely have more time for the vegetation to recover.
Something we need to be cautious about is just how we humans are developing the land, and how, a river is meant to flood, a river is meant to go through a drought. That's a natural process, right? But when we come in, it might hit a little bit harder, or developing near flood zone, and that could totally change as well. That's our natural cycle too in this area. We go through a period of flooding and rains, heavy rains, and then we go through a period of drought.
Drought is the enemy, because we need rain to keep the flows going in the rivers, and the more we as people develop over the recharge zone, the more parking lots and malls and houses and anything you put over the recharge zone, the less water can get into the aquifer, and that's our mortal enemy. And that's why San Antonio has worked and is continuing to work very hard on acquiring land in the recharge zone to protect their water source. San Marcos has done some of that. We have a very good ordinance that keeps people from building over a certain percent of impervious cover over the recharge zone. The current permit ends at the end of 2027, and so we have a new permit in 2028 for the next probably 30 years, and that will have to include climate change. So that permit will have a huge discussion and a lot of things that we're going to do to offset climate change as much as we can.
Just being aware of the impacts that we have on the environment in general is good. A lot of people don't realize, the effect that their actions have on water quality. I think there's a give and take, right? You enjoy these natural areas, you want to continue to enjoy them, so you learn about them, and you learn about the ways that you impact those areas and try to reduce those ways so that you can continue to enjoy them. Kind of goes full circle.